Do we have a second? We have a second by Councilmember Bivens. Is there any discussion for council at this point?
Mayor, I would like to have the opportunity, and if anybody else would, to meet with staff before the final vote on this, to go again. I called Melissa and asked about it, and asked Mr. Cox about it as well. And then this clarification, this is only like, you know, been going through it all. I would like to have that opportunity to go over it in more depth before the next vote is taken.
Well, she's open to meetings anytime. I think you bring up a good point, Kay. I think if there are questions on this, we need to meet with them in the public. You know, public can do this. We're just setting a public hearing date today. Then we will have the public hearing, assuming this passes, on July the 3rd, and the public will be able to come into it. And for the sake of discussion, let me say this. I am happy to see young people involved in city government. I mean, that really gives me a great amount of pleasure. And I'm glad to see that. And I know that there's a lot of talk about bringing the mixed-use district as a separate item, or maybe separating all three of those. And maybe that's something we need to consider and that we can talk about. And we may talk with the planning commission about that, or talk about the planners here in the city. It might be something that we might decide to do with the council when we have the public hearing. I think it's a valid point, but thank you, young people, for being involved in your local government. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, please enter your vote. 7 yeas, no nays. Sets the public hearing date for July 3rd. The next item comes before council is 9E, board commission appointments. The first item will be city council consideration of Mayor Thomas's nomination to Morristown Utility Commission. Before I give you the name of my nominee, I would like to ask the city attorney to give you the opinion of MTAS as to how the nomination process is to be carried out for the remainder of the nominations. And I would also, before I do that and turn it over to the city attorney, give you an explanation as to why this was all about. Mr. Jesse is our city attorney, is one of the most trustworthy people I know of, and I take everything he says to heart. But in this case, our city attorney also is the attorney for Morristown Utility Commission. It has nothing to do with trust. Dick knows that. It's just that it puts him in an unusual position, and I thought I would take some of the pressure off of him and get an opinion from MTAS. But then I'll say again, I take everything that Dick says to heart, and I trust him. Without any question, Dick, would you please give the opinion of MTAS?
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I know.
It's a little bit complicated, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. The initial question was, at the May 1st meeting, when the act was ratified, at what point did that ratification become effective? And Mr. Hensley, who I had a chance to talk with today, and by the way, I want to make one disclaimer. I did not draft this private act. That was up a legislative council. He based the opinion letter that you received and shared with me on the assumption that you had made the nomination prior to the ratification of the act. So I think maybe that's why both of us were confused a bit about the content of his letter. And we clarified that fact, along with the fact he didn't know that the list of the 3 persons selected by the Utilities Commission had been delivered prior to that meeting. And I told him about that. So I think he thinks it's more probable than not, even though he wasn't clear on those facts. He thinks it's more probable than not that the action taken at that meeting by the mayor in making the nomination was premature, because you were acting from a list that had been furnished under the old act. And if that is the case, and I think that's a reasonable interpretation, then you would have you haven't nominated anyone since that meeting.
No, sir.
You would begin counting with your nomination today.
And that was the reason for not giving a name at the last meeting. I know Councilmember Lavelle asked me that. And the reason was I had questions as to how many more nominations I was permitted, and I wanted to stay within the guidelines of what had been changed by this council. Okay, with that.
Was that all clear?
No.
No, well, let me tell you, even after we had received the opinion, Dick and I sat down and we looked at it and we said, you know, wow, what is this? But it makes sense if you, and I think it takes the pressure off of, I think it's asking a lot of you to represent bodies and give an opinion.
I understand perfectly, man, but don't worry about
And
it.
that was the purpose for that.
The real crux of it is, and it could go either way, does the fact that the utility system made this list that was submitted for your consideration prior to ratification of the new act, does that render the action taken by you ineffective as of that meeting? And it could go either way, but I think his interpretation is a reasonable.
Very good.
My main question is this number 1, 2, or 3?
This is number one.
This is number 1.
Okay. With that, is there any question from council on why that action was taken, why I went to that? You understand the reason for it? Okay.
I think you're just dragging something you have to embarrass the city some more, but that's my opinion.
Now, well, that is your opinion, Councilmember.
Because to what end, Mayor?
And that's obvious.
Yeah.
Well, that's both your opinion, gentlemen. If you want to discuss it one at a time, go ahead.
Mayor, what is your nomination today?
We have no more discussion. All right. City Council's consideration of Mayor Thomas's nomination to Morristown Utility Commission for a 5-year term to expire on August 2016 is Peter Campbell.
I make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion fails for a second.
I make a motion to reject that nomination.
We have a motion to reject the nomination. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion by council? All right, at this point, we'll vote. Remember, this is the one where if you are saying, I agree with this motion, you would vote. Let me see, I'm getting it backwards. I don't see.
Yes.
The motion is to reject.
To reject, so
Yes.
either vote yes for the rejection, or no, not to reject. All right, please enter your votes. All right, 5 yeas, 2 nays. Passes to reject. Next item come for council is item number 2. It's City Council's consideration of renomination to the Industrial Development Board of the City of Morristown for an additional 6-year term to expire on June 30th. And we would like to do this, if it's all right with the city administrator, to vote all of the 5 people on one time rather than take names separately.
Yes, sir, I would recommend these nominations of these 5 people who previously served on the board and served well, have been recommended by the board for renomination, reappointment. If there's no objection from council, it would be most efficient to consider all 5 with one motion. If there's any objections from council, we could separate them out, but unless there's a problem with any or all of them, we would recommend a single motion to expedite things.
I think this council is very fortunate to have these gentlemen right here who represent the city. Development Board, Industrial Development Board, which does a great job following us, has for many years. I think we owe every one of them thank you, gratitude for their involvement and stepping forward to fill this position. I make a motion to accept all 5.
We have a motion to renominate, as recommended by the Industrial Development Board, 5 members on the list, which are Steve Amos, James Crane, Jack Fishman, Rosemary Moody, and Joe Swan. Do we have a second? We have a second by Councilmember Senator. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
I'd like to ask Mr. Fishman, how many years, sir, you been on here, on this board?
On the board, sir?
On the board, how many years?
Well, I don't know, Dick Jesse was in the 9th. grade. Daddy said that he was up in the nest practicing his horn. They brought me to town as the chamber executive type of thing, and I took my training and tutelage under his father on the street and courts. And that would have been about February the 14th, 1959. But that's how I went on the board, because the board, the state of Tennessee didn't have a board in 1959. The board was appointed in 1960. At that particular time, I went on the board, and as manager of the chamber, I was secretary of the board. And I was on the board in 1965, and then I moved to Nashville, and resigned, head of economic development. When I came back in 1966, they appointed me back to the board, city council bid in 1967. I've always said that they figured that they overpaid me when I was chamber manager, and as a consequence, they just wanted me to do this work for free. And so I got back on the board in '67.
Jack, we appreciate you accepting that pay scale too.
Is it still free?
Yeah, it is.
Any other questions by council? Carrie, no, please enter your vote. 7 yeas, no nays. Next item come before council is item number 3. It's city council's consideration and nomination of Mr. Marshall Ramsey to the Industrial Development Board of the city of Morristown to fill the remainder of Mr. Mervyn Testerman's term to expire on June 30th, 2016. Is there any comments on that, city administrator?
Mr. Testerman's slot in the board has not been filled. Mr. Ramsey's on board and doing an excellent job. We wholeheartedly endorse his nomination for the board.
I make that motion.
I second.
We have a motion by Councilmember LaBelle. We have a second by Councilmember, who seconded? You did, by Councilmember James. All right, is there any discussion? I would like to make a comment at this point. Mr. Marshall, I've seen you work already, and we are very fortunate city to have you, and I'm glad you're here. All right. Any other discussion? No, please enter the vote. 7 yeas, no nays. Next item, the item number 10, city administrator's report. Tony.
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to do, I have notes here somewhere, let me see. A couple of things that are in your package. First is a technical line item transfer of the budget. This has to do with the department that handles street lighting for the city. This is a technical revision made under my authority, and just need to report it to you for your information. There's nothing material there, no net increase, just adjusting for line items in the budget. The second thing that's also in your package is a reporting requirement for the general obligation bonds we recently issued. As required under state code and our recently adopted debt policy, these documents are provided to make sure you're fully informed and aware of the recent debt issue. I think we're all aware we worked long and hard to be able to borrow this money. I think you're certainly well informed. If you have any questions, please call either myself or Mr. Clark. We'll be happy to fill in any details that you may have. I did want to report to you that I spent a fair amount of time in Greenville this afternoon in federal court. There was a hearing under Judge Greer's auspices concerning our proposed settlement on the Witt sewer case. We had proposed a settlement with the plaintiffs, and the court reviewed that settlement. There were some objections from some of the plaintiffs. The judge indicated after review and listening to arguments that the settlement was fair, adequate, reasonable, and in the public interest. He said that he would sign an order declaring that that settlement to be in effect this afternoon, which will give us 5 days in order to make payments, and then we will need to continue with the repairs for the Witt system to come in full compliance with the order. With regard to our operation in making those repairs, Witt stations, pump stations 2 and 3 are in full operation at this point in time. WIC 1 began testing this week. We have full expectation that it will be online by the end of the week, and we should be fully complete with all the work of the project by the middle of July. That will involve cleanup, fencing, and the landscaping around the project. But we should be well ahead of the order deadline of August in order to meet that. So we're about to turn the corner and close the chapter on that particular lawsuit and that piece of our sewer puzzle. So I'm very pleased to return with that good news from Greenville. And that's all I have to report today.
Thank you, John. Next item for council's communications and petitions. This is a portion of the meeting where members of the audience may speak to subjects, actually anything you want to talk about. Guidelines provided, and you probably picked up guidelines as you came into the council chamber. So we will open up the floor and podium to remarks from the audience. And if you would please, whenever you come to the podium, state your name and address. All right, address all your comments to the chair. The floor is now open for communications and petitions from all.
Reverend Nigel Marlon Reed Sr. First of all, I want to point out that I am an ordained minister. Two, I'm glad to hear that y'all settled the lawsuit, because I have one in court too, if I could give this to you, sir.
Give it to the officer.
It's semi-sorted, not really served, but it just to let you know that I'm tired, extremely tired of how I've been racially profiled, my name tarnished, or to try to tarnish my name. Let me also point out that my ex-wife tried to kill her then 17-year-old child with a 10-inch butcher knife in the city of Morristown. Police department did nothing to protect my child, and I came to the next meeting to give you another police report where that woman, Tanya Faye, then known as Reed, now known as Treese, tried to kill me with the same butcher knife over her lover, Dale Sherfield. I want to point out also I have another lawsuit that I filed against Herbert Holcomb. The reason why I'm pointing all this out is the corruption in this town. Do you realize God had let me know that this town is another Sodom and Gomorrah? This state, which was known to me as a child in the Bible Belt, is nothing but a quandrament of sin. Sounds like I know a little bit about your education, though. Let me tell you something. We the people, God's children, it's tired of you five up there. When y'all talking about over there in your district, Boys and Girls Club over there, the kids going to have to run into the creeks to get their basketballs. Please, sir, make sure that there's a fence over there.
Please address the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Address the chair rather than the other councilman.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. If you, Mayor, if you would let these different council people know in their districts that we, the poor people, need bathrooms that we could use, and if you could let them know we need fences up so that the balls don't go into the creek, and if you could, oh, one more point, and I'm a bounce. I'm a hardcore preacher, period. You people went, even the governor of this state, to change our, what we call our constitution, or change our charter for one man. But now it's time to change the charter. Nothing against you, Mr. Cox, but we need a full-time mayor. If you cannot support a full-time mayor, why don't we have a county administrator?
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm Pauline Madron, of course. I live at 2074 North Economy Road. I wanted to address you this evening and thank those council members who listened to the voters and residents and Country Club Estates about proposed Massengill Springs development. I would also like to suggest that for future developments, council members make site visits before voting on any planned development proposal. And for those of you who did visit the site, we thank you. I would also like to suggest that floodplain maps be shown on all development proposals where applicable. It's important to make decisions based on facts, but do you always have all the facts? Relying on information from developers and city departments may not tell the entire story. It is imperative to hear from voters and residents. When the Massengill Springs plan was presented to the Planning Commission last week, 2 critical pieces of information were omitted from the plan. The FEMA flood zone was not depicted, and an empty lot was shown opposite a proposed access road, when in fact a house has been on that lot for 10 years. This error was made 2 times on the concept plan. I would also like to speak to the proposed zoning code changes discussed earlier in this meeting, which were made to accommodate commercial developers. Changes in the mixed-use district seem rather dramatic. This use currently limits commercial development to 20% on a 20-acre parcel, if I read the changes correctly. The proposed revision would increase that to 50% commercial development on a 5-acre parcel. There are a host of other changes to the zoning code in this ordinance, which will facilitate increased commercial development in the appropriate setting. These changes should be evaluated very carefully prior to second reading on July 3rd. If they are approved, there will be a significant impact on any property that is rezoned from residential to commercial, such as the Massengill Springs proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments?
Do I allowed to speak again?
Yes, you may. This is a different section from what you spoke in earlier.
I still have the same document in my hand, the one that the Philadelphia lawyer is going to have to look at. It's very coincidental that on June the 12th, a number of us citizens from the Country Club Estate had a meeting with Melissa. And then all of a sudden, on June the 13th, out comes this proposal. Is this an end run for the bunch proposal? We will be there. We will guarantee. We have 140 signatures on a petition. We presented that petition to them at a meeting last week, and we will have more. But you have stepped on the tiger's tail, and we are not going to give up. You are not going to ruin the value of our home. You are not going to put traffic lights and traffic confusion on Waters Drive, Penny Cottage. Like I said, you will have a meeting, and we will be there. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Any other comments?
I'm Dave Freshel, 2105 Collins Street. About 15 years ago, I tried to put a small building in the back of my property, and it was classified as a machine shop. And you can't do that in a residential area, correct? It's pretty much easy to understand if you couldn't do that. Well, I get in the mail a couple of weeks ago, this Food City that's going to be about 90 feet from my back property line. And I think it's a little bit close, and there's no protection to our neighborhood now. And I think it's going to hurt the value of the property. And I think that there could be a buffer, like a road that would run parallel with Collins Street, where you would have a row of houses behind mine, a road, another row of houses, and then a buffer berm type area, and then a food city. There's plenty of room on that property to build a food city. And it looks like most of it's pushed back just for future development, that you really don't know what's going to happen there. There's really nothing being developed at the east end of the city that was just built. That's pretty much empty land. I understand that or at least what I've heard, the Angles isn't being developed because of the sinkholes or there's some type of construction problem there. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it's the same type of situation. Push the store all the way back up against the neighbors, and then you don't do anything with the land in front. I just want this to be just really considered about what it's gonna do to our neighborhood. I've lived there 25 years, and some people have lived there over 40. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for your comments.
Evan McKinley, 115 East 3rd North Street. I wasn't planning to speak on anything today, but then I heard all this come up about the rezoning and all this, and for the second reading next time. So rather than wait till next time when you're going to be taking a vote, I wanted to go ahead and at least offer my opinions now so you can be thinking about it in case you wanted to have any changes as a result. First off, with no disrespect to Melissa or anybody on any commission or department, I really don't care what New York is doing on their zone. Secondly, I believe it would be a good idea, since there is so much in this upcoming bill, to break it into separate parts, because one part may be good and another might not. And thirdly, if I understood right here in the presentation, there was an example of 20 acres reduced to 5, and then I just think that's going a little bit overboard, and the reason given was, well, the county says 5 and the state says 5. But to me, sometimes when you try and make things consistent across the board, that's reducing it to the lowest common denominator. And oftentimes, in my opinion, an area, in this case the city, may hold values special that the county and the state do not for their own particular reasons. So I don't think that the goal should always be to have something reduced just to be consistent. And the last point is, this thing about the open spaces. I understand, it's going to go from 30% county roadways and parking lots down to 10% as a recommendation to make it more real. On the other hand, I don't recall in the past for sure, but it could very well be that when that 30% was proposed, that one of the reasons was, well, we'll grandfather in people who can't meet that because when they started their business, they didn't know we were going to go for 30%, so we'll go ahead and grandfather it in by counting parking lots and roadways. But if you reduce it to 10, you're getting rid of the 30 for good. And if it was important enough to have 30% in the past, why is it not important enough now? I don't think that we should become like San Francisco and everything be high priced because they want all these greenways and everything. But there is a point to be had for open spaces. And the other thing I do remember this for sure, when Gary Johnson was mayor, there were a lot of times that you all got away from the open space requirement that was proposed by the state. And one time after another, you gave in to developers and got rid of the open space requirement. So I hope you don't get rid of it this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments?